The following program is a production of KSPS Public Television and is made possible by the Friends of Seven.
There's a special place in Western Canada, a place where ranching and oil are big and the sky is bigger. A place where people wear a white Stetson and cowboy boots and a business suit in between. A place that represents the spirit of the West. Hi, my name is James Keelaghan. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I was born here in Calgary, Alberta. And Calgary's been called one of the fastest-growing cities in Canada. And as the sun rises on the city this morning, it's home to more than 750,000 people. Sometimes the pace of life here is fast. It's a little bit like rock and roll. But for the next hour, I'd like you to take a waltz with me through the pages of Calgary's history, to revisit some of the places and people that have made this such a special community.
At the fork of two rivers, near a wood palisade, neath the turquoise blue sky, while the sun slowly falls, I sat down on the bank in the cottonwood shade, watched the city reflected in the Bull River's walls. At the fork of two rivers in the late afternoon, the cottonwoods tremble and the golden leaves fall. I sat down on the bank, watched the rise of the moon as the leaves on the water did the Bull River waltz. Darling, I've got $1. Let's go downtown. There's a dance hall I know. There's a band of renown. Darling, let's go out waltzing. Take a spin on my arm. It's a cure for what ails you. Proof against harm.
Man, it was the place in Calgary to go, to meet the girls, for instance.
Penley's was the place, and the music was wonderful, and the people were great. A lot of good memories there.
The Palace and the Flour Mill were the only two little bit high buildings downtown. And the first high-rise was Elberton House, and it's dwarfed now.
And it picked up a lot of speed. It was going through prairie grass to get out there in those days. And the thing whipped back and forth, and the motorman stood astride, and he was just like riding a horse.
People say, you probably play the guitar a lot better than you do on television. You're just playing that bad to no, it's as good as I can do it, folks, sorry.
I just thought they were idiots. Like, how often do your parents stand at the bottom of the stairs looking proud as punch while you're running up and down the stairs with a sledgehammer?
There are two things in the world that everybody seems to be aware of from Canada, and that's the Calgary Stampede and the RCMP musical ride. Not bad for a bunch of cowboys.
As the leaves on the water did the Bull River waltz.
What event put Calgary on the Canadian map? Was it the building of Fort Calgary in 1875? Was it the discovery of oil in Turner Valley in 1914? Well, those who were around at the time will tell you it was neither of these events, and it didn't even happen in Calgary.
I was involved in the Great Train Trip to Toronto in 1948.
It was a football game in Toronto, the 1948 Grey Cup.
And on the Tuesday night, the train left the station in Calgary, headed for Toronto, 2,500 miles away. 3 nights and 2 days of travel. Or as Charles Dickens would say, 2,500 miles of making merry.
The Stampede Special was 14 cars long and carried 250 people, a dozen horses, a chuck wagon, and a 4-piece Western band. They were on their way to Toronto to root for the hometown boys, the Calgary Stampeders.
It was a notorious thing in Canadian football at that time because the East used to always win. And Calgary had never been to the national final. You can imagine the excitement in the city of there was only, I believe, about 70,000 people at that point, and we used to draw crowds of 15,000, so there was more than 20% of the city used to come to the games, and the rest of the city got caught up in it.
If enthusiasm among the rooters could win football championships, the Calgary Stampeders would already be possessors of the coveted Grey Cup. Calgary Herald, Wednesday, November 24th, 1948.
Reels and square dancers in the station and in the lobby of the Royal York Hotel had pop-eyed Easterners looking on in amazement. They thought the Calgary Stampede had moved to the shores of Lake Ontario. Calgary Herald, Friday, November 26, 1948.
The Stampeder Football Club was a scruffy bunch of kids with high hopes of being the best football team in Canada. Only an extreme optimist would have ever believed that they had a chance, but Calgary has always been full of extreme optimists. 20,000 people crowded into Varsity Stadium for the game. Top price admission was $2 a seat. Bill Pratt was working for Red Dutton, president of the National Hockey League at the time.
Mr. Dutton said to me, Bill, you're going to be cold. And I said, oh, no, Mr. D, I'm not going to be cold. Lots of clothes on. Oh, yeah, you're going to be cold. Here, put this coat on. I remember a big black coat, quite long coat. He put it on my shoulders, and I pretty near went to the floor. There was 4 bottles of whiskey in the pockets. I was to be the bartender. Being a non-drinker is the best guy to have as a bartender. But one thing, I had the seat right on the 55-yard line in the 12th row. I remember very clearly. But I had to pass drinks in both directions. When the game was over, Mr. Dutton said to me, hey, kid, here's a list. Collect it for me, will you? And it was his bets for that game. $27,000.
The optimists had been right. The Calgary Stampeders had beaten the Ottawa Rough Riders 12-7. History had been made on a football field, and Calgary had stepped onto the Canadian stage.
We rode the train back with the fans, and for an 18-year-old boy, that was quite an experience. And there were things that went on I didn't believe. You know, I couldn't. I can't really tell you a lot about them, but there was drinking that I couldn't participate in or didn't participate in. There was all kinds of partying and things that went on, and it was really a rocking train.
The 1948 Grey Cup victory party in Calgary was VE Day, New Year's Day, and Dominion Day all rolled into one. John Clark was in the crowd that day and remembers the bedlam in the streets when the victorious Stamps came home.
Everybody went to meet them just like the ending of the war, really. And I was standing, I remember, right outside the station, and a friend of mine, Spud Murphy, who had more guts than a slaughterhouse, he put on a Homburg hat, and he was always right up on the stage with the big wheels, and he had no official capacity, but he was amazing. I was standing there, and I look up, and here's Spud there, so he said, John, and I took my hat off, and he took my picture, and all that crowd.
18-year-old Normie Kwong wore number 23 on the field that day. At first, Normie says his mother didn't approve of him playing such a rough sport.
She found out about football, how it was played, and some of the hitting that went on in it. So she didn't exactly encourage me. And in fact, my first year when I came home from practice, I used to have to take my gear and hide it in the garage, and come back in the house and have dinner. And she'd wonder why I smelled so bad all the time. So I had to give her an excuse that I used to run a lot.
The 1948 Grey Cup proved 2 things: that those barefoot boys on the prairie could play football, and more importantly, that the people of Calgary collectively could do anything they set their minds to, and the rest of Canada now knew it. These Calgarians could never have imagined that this attitude would help them welcome the world and host the most successful Olympic Winter Games ever, exactly 40 years later. But that comes later in our story.
It's a fun ride on a streetcar. I rode streetcars to high school all 4 years, and the old streetcars had a little section in the back called a smoker room. And I can remember I went into the smoker room there after somebody had smoked a cigar, and when I got to my destination at East Calgary High there, I was kind of woozy there from the cigar smoke.
The boys used to grab a ride on the back of the streetcar on the outside, and they'd kind of duck down so that the conductor couldn't see them. But and I do know that in the winter, right on our hill, the conductor would have to stop the streetcar and come out with sacks and put sacks underneath the wheels to get a little friction to get back up the hill again. But also in the streetcars, the back end was what they called the smoker, and anybody that smoked cigars, cigarettes, pipes was allowed to go in there, and we thought that was really neat, but we weren't allowed in there.
Streetcars rumbled through the streets of Calgary for almost half of the 20th century. Few people had cars, and there were few city buses. If it was too far to walk, most people either rode a bicycle or took a streetcar to where they needed to go.
I remember many things about the streetcars, particularly on the run to Bowness when they cranked the speed up a little bit. I was amazed at the amount of play in the windows. The streetcars would sway sideways and back and forth, and the glass would go many directions without cracking or splitting. They had a remarkable tolerance for sway. I also remember, I think the fine was $50 fine for spitting, which was ignored in the back smoker section of the streetcar.
The first streetcar rattled through the streets of Calgary on July 5th, 1909, the same year that Calgary's first skyscraper, the Grain Exchange, was built. All 6 stories of it. Both were signs that Calgary had become a real modern city.
We used to see the streetcar going by, and we would put our hand on the thing and get towed on a bike. But if you didn't have your bike, it would have even better. We'd hang on to the bars across the back window and a sort of a ledge out there and sort of crouch like that and hang up. And when you got to your stop, if he wasn't stopping, we would pull the cord that held the thing onto the electrical wire, and then it would stop, and we'd run like the very dickens, and the old guy'd have to come out and pull it down and maneuver it on again, you know. And the air would be blue for about 4 blocks around.
In the old days, when things were really tough, I remember somebody discovered that you could take one of those little streetcar tickets and take a razor blade and part it. And you could really make 2 streetcar tickets out of one by when you boarded the streetcar. I never did this, but others did. Put the printed side of the ticket toward the conductor and drop it in the box. And if the other side of the ticket, of course, was where it had been split and there was no printing, and the other half of the ticket was good for another day.
Electric streetcars served Calgary faithfully for 41 years, the last one retiring on December 29th, 1950. There is one surviving original streetcar from the Calgary Municipal Railway, the one that made that last run. Car number 14 now makes the run from the lower parking lot to the upper parking lot at Heritage Park regularly. Here are the hand straps that steadied Calgary commuters all those years ago. And while it hasn't been enforced in a number of years, there's still a posted $50 fine for spitting. A replica streetcar, number 15, also serves the Heritage Park route. Whatever car you ride, it's still a marvelous trip back in time. Perhaps the most popular destination to ride a Calgary streetcar was to the end of the line, up the valley west of town, to the deluxe suburb of Bowness, advertised as the ideal spot to build a home in the most sought-after residential area of Calgary. The visionary behind the project was John Hextall, who spent $55,000 on an iron bridge to provide access to the property. The bridge helped, but Hextall still needed to attract more people to his development if he wanted to sell all the lots. So, in 1912, Hextall made the city of Calgary a proposition. He would donate 2 islands in the middle of the Bow River as a city park if the city would run a street railway line to Bowness. The city agreed, and streetcars began running that summer to a lovely oasis at the end of the line called Bowness Park.
It picked up a lot of speed. It was going through prairie grass to get out there in those days. and the thing whipped back and forth, and the motorman stood astride, and he was just like riding a horse. It was quite an experience. If you get back in the smoker or someplace back there, the hind end was whipping around, and they were great fun.
Well, it was a treat just to go to Bowness Park and buy an ice cream cone there.
Paul Dufoux is one of the many Calgarians who remembers that half the fun of going to Bowness Park was getting there.
Bowness Park was the park that was quite a distance away, and the only way that you could get there was by streetcar. And I remember you had to pay 2 tickets. One ticket to get to Shoaldice Park, which is part way, and then another ticket to get to Bowness Park.
There was a feeling of freedom because you could walk all kinds of paths. You could sit and just watch the fountain. And in the evening, the colors, they had lights, I guess, to make the fountain light up. There was a smell of, I'm not sure that it was hamburgers, but there was maybe a Coney Island type smell about it because you could buy ice cream and things like that there. And of course the sounds were children laughing, playing, and the merry-go-round.
Perhaps the most unique feature of Bowness Park was the lagoon, a backwater of the Bow River where a fountain lit by colored lights caused a rainbow-colored mist to dance through the air.
And people could canoe. Prue remembers that because I ran her into the fountain one day. I think
talking,
trying to show off as a young swain.
Well, no, we were just, there were 4 of us in the canoe, I think, and we just were talking so much that we, and it just rode right into, or paddled right into it, and got quite soaked. I've never let him live it down. Yeah.
Little light dusting of water.
No.
In the middle of the lagoon, there was a building that was almost like an enclosed gazebo. And certainly on weekends and probably on summer afternoons, they played concert music, a series of recordings for maybe 2 hours. And you always knew when it was about to start because whoever spun the turntables was rowing his way over to the gazebo. And the music came, as I recall, they called it an orthophonic. And it was pretty pleasant to be sitting out there on the banks of the lagoon and listening to nice music and no advertisements. Nice way to spend an afternoon.
John Hextall never lived to see his dream of creating a special place for his fellow Calgarians come true. When World War I broke out in 1914, he took off to join the fighting in Europe, and he never came home. Bowness, the ideal spot to build a home, was annexed into the city of Calgary in 1964. The iron bridge Hextall built to bring people to Bowness still exists at Shoaldice, and Bowness Park is still there too. Walk across the middle of the blacktop area near the Park Cafe, and you can see the outline of where the bandstand used to be. Walk through the grass on the edge of the amusement area, and you can see where the youngsters used to buy their tickets and ride the carousel. Gaze across the lagoon, and you can see where the orthophonic used to play classical music throughout the park. The swimming pool has been filled in, but you can still walk the grounds of the old park where cattle used to graze. The miniature railroad that was installed in 1953 still runs through the park today, and good memories continue to be made at a special place called Bowness Park. It is still possible to ride the Bowness Carousel, too, but you have to do that in Heritage Park, where the old merry-go-round was moved in 1985.
I still go on the merry-go-round out at Heritage Park when I get there. It's, it's just something that kids do. You know, you pick your horse, whether it's white or brown or black. I never liked to sit on the benches. I always liked to ride the horse. So, but it was great. I really liked it.
Calgary has always been a city of confidence. but no other city can claim to have the greatest outdoor show on earth and mean it. Every July, Calgary becomes the Stampede, and the Stampede becomes Calgary. 10 days of rope and leather, sweat and dust, and a whole lot of fun.
You know, the Calgary Stampede is something that, if you describe the parts of it individually, you'd never get the idea. It's something that you have to participate in. It's kind of like Mardi Gras in New Orleans, or Carnival in Rio, or Venice, or some of these places, where you come to something and the heart of the city starts to beat, the spirit comes alive, and truly the essence of what it is to be in Calgary manifests itself.
The first popular Western pageant was Buffalo Bill and his Wild West show around the turn of the century. It was from the success of shows like this that a trick roper from New York got the idea to hold a Wild West show of his own. He would hold it in a city celebrated for its Western spirit, not in the United States, but in Canada. Guy Wiedeck had been through Canada on a traveling Wild West show in 1908 and returned to Calgary in 1912 to stage a one-time show as part of the Calgary exhibition to mark the passing of the Old West. The idea started as a Frontiers Day celebration, but would later be called the Stampede. It was advertised as the best dad-burned show in the world, and Wiedeck boasted it would make Buffalo Bill's Wild West extravaganza look like a sideshow. Many of the events we enjoy at the Stampede today got their start at the very first Stampede.
There's two events that really go back to the beginning of rodeo, or back deep into our heritage, one being saddle bronc riding, and that actually came from ranches or ranch cowboys. Of course, breaking horses to ride probably, since there were people in horses. The other event that is similar to whenever people started working with horses and cattle is roping. So probably the calf roping and saddle bronc riding are the two events historically that trace back to the beginning of horses and cattle.
The first Stampede was a lot of fun, but a financial disappointment. Later, Wiedeck returned to Calgary with the idea of holding a victory Stampede to celebrate the end of World War I. The event was a popular success, but again, a financial disappointment, partly because many spectators who felt the admission cost was too high climbed the nearby hill where they could watch the show for free, the hill we call Scotchman's Hill today. The Stampede was shelved again until 1923, and it's been a Calgary tradition ever since. The 1923 Calgary Stampede set the pattern for everything that came after. It was the first year of the Rangeland Derby, the chuck wagon races that have become the Stampede's signature event. The chuck wagon breakfast got its start in 1923, as did the Stampede Parade. And it was the first year all Calgary was encouraged to go western. What would Guy Wiedeck think of the Stampede if he could see it now?
I don't think he'd believe it. Even a man like him, who is very optimistic, I don't think he really would have believed what he created. Because I think it's grown beyond most people's wildest expectations. I mean, 1 million people coming to the Stampede. And of course, Calgary was, in those days, I said 30 or 40,000 people. But they had good attendances in those days. But to actually exceed 1 million people and to pay prize money in excess of $1 million, I think that would be beyond his wildest expectations.
From the very beginning, despite opposition, Wiedeck invited and encouraged natives to participate in the Stampede. He wanted it to be a show for cowboys and Indians, and for Indians who were cowboys. Gordon Crowchild rode his first Stampede when he was just a teenager, back in the 1940s. Now approaching age 70, he still rides in the Stampede. Gordon says he tried a desk job for a while, but it wasn't for him.
It was boring to me, like I didn't enjoy that life, because I see people ride to the office down here, horseback, and I wanted to do that. I mean, I'd ride to work too some days, and some days my dad would drive me on his old car to work. But I lasted 1 year, and then I gave that up, offered to be a cowboy. And I thought, I'll be a cowboy all my life until the day I die. And when I die, I told my wife, just bury me the way you see me today, sitting here or wherever. Don't buy me a new hat or new boots because I'm gone. I just want to be remembered to what I am today.
Gordon's father was the late David Crowchild, the last lifetime chief of the Tsuut'ina Nation. The route he traveled from the reserve into town is now a paved expressway that was named for him in 1966, Crowchild Trail. One of the youngest traditions of the Stampede is now 30 years old. The young Canadians of the Calgary Stampede are the life of the party at the grandstand show. Grandstand producer Randy Avery thought up the young Canadians as a way to bring life to the final act of the 1968 show. Tom Owens was in the group.
The thing that I remember most is that through the 6 months or 7 months of rehearsal before the show, we had worked with just a piano player. We didn't even have what we call a click track now, which sets the pace, sets the rhythm so that you can choreograph and whatnot. We had a piano player. So here we go into our dress rehearsal on stage with a full orchestra. I mean, your feeling is that little old us, we have like a 20-piece orchestra or whatever it was. It felt like a million with all the brass and all the sounds coming out. And that was the most exciting part for me.
Bill Avery is proud to continue the entertainment tradition his father started more than 30 years ago.
It's about learning skills, about learning abilities. It's about opening your heart up to people and having the people open up their hearts to them. And people come out of our show saying, I'd forgotten that it can be like that. And it really can, and it really is, and it's a wonderful thing. You know, there's an old song, you know, I love those dear hearts and gentle people that live in my hometown. And that really sort of says it all. I mean, they're dear hearts, they're gentle people. Great performers. It's a wonderful evening, and you know, culminates in a huge blast of fireworks, and everybody comes out of there saying, well, that was something.
When Calgary incorporated as a city in 1894, the population was about 4,000. During the boom years of the 1970s, nearly that many people a month moved to town. Much of what was old about Calgary was destroyed during that time. But one of the places that survived was the Palliser Hotel, which opened in 1914.
It was the place to meet in Calgary, bar none. You know, like they had the Friday night supper dances, and you really had to, you know, you had to dress up. There was no question about it. A real good suit and dark suit, and very decorous, and the girls nearly all wore long dresses. Mm-hmm. So it was a rare occasion to go there, it really was. And
New Year's.
Yeah, New Year's and things like that. And you'd have to book ahead a long way because there weren't that many places to go. But the Palliser, the lobby was so beautiful too, and to meet in there, it was sort of took you and you thought you were real posh, you know, for a while.
Clam chowder and their own made French bread. That was, everybody knew the Palliser clam chowder. I don't know whether you could even get it any other place. I never ate any other place, and I've eaten it many places since. But often I'd go there and with friends, and we'd just have a good-sized bowl of clam chowder and Palliser French bread.
The Palliser Hotel is everything that is grand about Old Calgary. Harry Sanders knows her story better than anyone else I know. We walked through the old hotel together recently and talked about what has happened between these walls.
Since the day the hotel opened in 1914, every distinguished person who's ever come through Calgary has either been entertained here or has stayed here overnight, ranging from royalty to politicians to celebrities. We've had, you know, everyone from the Prince of Wales, King Edward VIII, here to much more recently Queen Elizabeth II. We've had Mikhail Gorbachev here. At least one Prime Minister of Canada has lived in the hotel.
That was R.B. Bennett?
Yes, he lived here through the 1930s. Sent a box of chocolates to every staff member every Christmas.
And we're now in the penthouse of the Palliser Hotel. But this room itself wasn't actually on the hotel when it was originally constructed.
No, the hotel was 4 floors shorter than it is now when it first opened in the summer of 1914. So, again, before this penthouse was built, there was a sunroom that had the same kind of function as this, 4 floors beneath us, that was eliminated when this new penthouse opened in the summer of 1929.
Would this have been the tallest building in town?
It was. It was the tallest when it was built, and it again became the tallest when they added on in 1929. And it was a favorite place for camera enthusiasts, it was said, because from the roof here, they could get a commanding view of the skyline, of the Rocky Mountains on a good day, and it was a place where they could Kodak to their heart's content.
Kodak being a verb.
That was the verb.
And we're down in the lobby of the Palliser Hotel now, and in front of the Crystal Ballroom. Now, I've played in this room with my band, but when we played, we were always set up inside the room. That wasn't always the way it worked.
No, when the hotel opened, and for many years after that, the band would have been out in the on this balcony, just on the outside of the ballroom, facing the lobby. So they would have played from up there. You could hear the band from the Crystal Ballroom and also from the lobby. And this corner of the lobby actually became expansion space, overflow space for the big supper dances that they used to have. So if they needed extra space, people were out here in the lobby.
And so there were some regular bands that actually played in this room.
That's right. And in the 1920s, the house band, Jerry Fuller's orchestra, used to get a national radio broadcast out of here on a weekly basis from the Palliser Hotel, heard across Canada.
The Palliser remains what she was when new, an oasis on the plains, which still serves the best French bread and clam chowder in town.
The Western Nest and you, dear.
The West, a Nest, and You was the theme song of the Mart Kenny Orchestra. In the big band era, this song was the anthem of a generation of young Calgarians who would be tempered with a depression and a world war. Big band dances were a way to escape the troubles of the world in those years, and for an evening at least, be carefree. Two places in particular were famous for hosting big band dances: the Palliser Hotel and Penley's.
My father started a dancing school and a dancing ballroom about 1912. From 1912 right through the 20s and 30s, teens, 20s and 30s, 40s, they were the ballroom days when people went to dances just to dance. Great big floors and seats around on the perimeter against the wall, but no tables or anything like that. It was pure dancing.
Ken's parents, Jack and Juanita Penley, built Penley's Dancing Academy into a Calgary legend. Each had the reputation of being a superb dancer, and together they had the reputation of running a business held in the highest esteem for generations.
The dances started about 9 o'clock. The orchestra got there a little earlier to tune up, get ready. And the dances seemed to, they ran in sets of 3 musical pieces was a dance set. And then you could change partners or whatever. There was a fast foxtrot, then a slow foxtrot, and then a waltz. That went on like this. Every third dance right through the evening up to number 18 was a waltz. At the end of the 9th, there was an intermission. It started up again. You could go with your date as a couple or go singly and meet a partner there. And it was just a great time for dancing.
The traditions of those big band days are kept alive in many places throughout Calgary today. These are the Bow Cliff Seniors. Pick a couple off the dance floor here and ask them where they met, and many will say, "We met at Penley's."
New Year's Eve 1933, Dad had Mart Kenny's orchestra, Mart Kenny and his Western Gentlemen, which was one of the finest. He served a hot turkey dinner, provided hats, noisemakers, balloons, $1.50 a couple. There couldn't have been anything better.
Penley's Dancing Academy closed in 1964. On the site today is the new Toronto Dominion Square. On the second floor, where the dance floor used to be, is a plaque dedicated to the Penleys. It says, "Dance me to the end of time," as many husbands and wives still say to each other every time they hear this tune.
I was a member of the first all-Chinese hockey team.
Paul Dufoux remembers growing up in Calgary as the first generation from the East to be born in the West.
We practically lived on skates in the wintertime. We had a small-size rink and all learned to be fairly good stick handlers.
Ice skating, whether for hockey or recreation, has been a Calgary pastime for generations. The Baxter family started one of Calgary's first public skating rinks around the turn of the century. In the winter, it was the Crystal Rink. In the summer, it was the Crystal Pool. Everyone just called it the Crystal.
My father always told me it was $85,000, and a gallon of water in the swimming pool for every citizen of Calgary.
The Crystal was on the edge of downtown, at 4th Avenue and 9th Street. A graceful lady on a tin sign beckoned to young and old alike. In summer and winter, Calgarians flocked to the Crystal by the hundreds.
Oh, man. It was the place in Calgary to go, yeah. To meet the girls, for instance. And, oh, yes, that's for sure, yes. 300 or 400 people on Sunday, maybe more. At quitting time, they'd go around and sweep the edges with brooms and sweep the edges out about, oh, even just a foot, a couple of feet. And then hand scrape it, you know, around into windrows. And, of course, in the old days, we had the horses, you know, to scrape the rink, and a great big scraper that the horse would pull, and two guys would walk beside with scrapers to hold the snow from going off the edges, you know.
The Crystal Pool closed in 1962, the rink in 1964. What was left turned to ashes 2 years later. But what was here lives in the memories of everyone who enjoyed skating and swimming at the Crystal.
Cheese, look at that.
Cheese, 2.5 packages for 27 cents.
Orange marmalade, 15 cents for a 12-ounce bottle of orange marmalade.
That's wonderful.
That's terrific.
Look at it. Well, I guess we'll never see those days again, will we?
John and Betty Clark remember a simpler, smaller Calgary, when cars had running boards, where doors were left unlocked and a hot lunch was 30 cents. Betty remembers parking her baby buggy on the sidewalk and going in to buy groceries at a store called Jenkins Grosseteria, the first self-serve grocery store in Canada.
And of course, to me, it was pretty special because I'd been used to rationing all those war years. So it was wonderful to be able to buy whatever you wanted. So I bought lots and sent it back to...
Kept us
we
broke
spent
for
a
2
lot
years,
of money
yeah.
just sending parcels back to England because it was so lovely to see all these things that we hadn't seen and knew that they would be so thrilled to get things like that, you know, because they still weren't getting them then, even in 1946.
During the Depression and war years, theaters were a great escape in Calgary. At their peak, there were more than a dozen in town. Ken Penley can name them all.
Starting at the east end of 8th Avenue, there was the Variety, then the Empress, and the Strand. And then two of the bigger ones were the Palace and the Capitol. They were very, very central. First Street West had the Grand and the Isis, which was a bit south of the downtown area. The Grand had been a vaudeville theater for many years, but they went to movies. Then in the neighborhoods, there were the Kinnaman, the Tivoli, the Crescent, the Gary, the Plaza, you know, depending where you lived.
The Capitol and the Palace, Calgary's largest and grandest theaters, opened across the street from each other in 1921. The Capitol had an almost regal ambiance and showed Calgary's first talkies in 1928. The Palace had 1,784 plush, upholstered seats and offered not only silent movies, but the finest traveling vaudeville acts of the day and regular performances of the Calgary Symphony Orchestra. Theaters back then had coat and hat check rooms, uniformed ushers, loge seats down front, often with smoking privileges, and baby rooms in back.
I was an usher in the old Crescent Theatre, and the friends used to come in, and this baby room was right at the back, and I had the key to it. And so my friend would come in, and he had his girlfriend. They could go in there to neck, and the glass was darkened, so you couldn't see from outside. And I used to let my friends in there for special. We never had any babies at 9 o'clock at night going to a movie.
Calgarians still go to the theater, but not like they used to. The Capitol Theatre was torn down in 1972, and the Palace closed in 1990. No more loges, no more uniformed ushers. The golden age of theaters is past.
Listen here, Wayland. I don't like you very much, and I don't like the people of Calgary very much.
Now, it may surprise you, and then again it may not surprise you, to learn that one of Calgary's most popular cultural exports is big-time wrestling. Fans in 36 countries around the world just can't get enough of Stampede Wrestling.
In this ring!
It started in 1957 when wrestling promoter Stu Hart made a local TV news director an offer he couldn't refuse.
And from there, I guess there was about 27 years worth of Stampede wrestling. The least important thing I've ever done, in a sense, journalistically. But over the years, I began to realize how bonding it was for fathers and sons and grandmas and so on. Every Saturday afternoon, and across the country, they'd gather in front of the television set and have a great time together. And that's not too bad. And besides, my approach was I want to turn it into as much comedy as I could find in it, okay? There were serious moments, supposedly, but I said to Stu at the time, if you want me to do a 100% sell job and this is serious and the guy's going to die in the ring, and you got the wrong guy. He said, well, let's try the entertainment angle, the comedy, and let's go. And it worked.
We pick up the action. It's all square on all fees. And Crockett has this place in an absolute uproar.
Whalen said he was going to be Dr. Whalen, but the broadcasting bug bit him in college and he dropped out. Instead of a career in medicine, Whalen has had a career in television, and he's grateful for the doors it opened for him, even Stampede Wrestling.
Isn't he huge? 7'6", 483 pounds. And he will be the...
Whalen is famous for making in the meantime and in between time a household phrase, a phrase that he says just came out of his mouth one day.
One night I was thinking, I don't know, I got to the end of the show, okay? It was spontaneous. I said, in the meantime and in between time, that's it, another edition of Stampede Wrestling. Next week I didn't say it. I mean, that had just popped into my head. Phone rang from a lot of fans saying, where's in the meantime and in between time? And I've gained a lot of notoriety, no residuals, despite the fact that it's still apparently in 36 countries of the world.
Had he been a doctor, Whalen would have helped people smile, but it's hard to imagine any career giving him more opportunities to make people laugh. And that's been good medicine for us all.
Oh, my heavens!
Calgary has the honor of having the longest-running children's show on Canadian television, The Buckshot Show. The host was a quintessential Calgarian, a friendly cowboy in a white hat known as Buckshot, who had a teddy bear sidekick named Benny.
This is Benny.
Just not comfortable here without my pal.
Yeah.
My
Okay.
cohort.
Feel better now?
Yeah, I'm
All right, relax. Okay.
Now I can relax. That's the bear.
Yep. This is the third one. Great. See, I can't put him on my hand without moving. I'm talking as Jim, but Benny's still moving his mouth. How are you doing that, pal?
The Buckshot Show signed on the air on CFCN in March of 1967. The hosts, Ron Barge and Jim Lewis, had other jobs at the station, but would break every day at noon to do the Buckshot Show. 3 weeks after, the station established a Buckshot fan club. More than 14,000 kids were members.
We had a suggestion box in the middle of the studio, and we said anybody can suggest a name for this character. And some of them I can't repeat, but somebody put the name, the two words Buckshot, Buck as the first name. And
I don't think I ever knew that.
Didn't you?
No, I don't think. I never really knew where that name came from.
While Barge essentially played himself, Lewis made and gave life to more than a half dozen other characters over the years, including Clyde the Owl, Foghorn the Firefly, Woodrow T. Beaver, Rodney the Rodent, and Heathcliff the Dragon.
I remember when I was about maybe 14 years old, I think I built a ventriloquist puppet and played with that for a few months and gave that up as something I wasn't going to do.
I didn't know that.
No, see, learn something every day.
I'm glad we came here.
Anyway, this is the guy we're going to introduce. This is Heathcliff the Dragon. Don't call me an alligator.
No, a lot of them say, where's the alligator? Where's the alligator? He gets upset. We have to go through
Not an
11
alligator,
minutes
I'm a dragon. My fire's gone out a long time ago, but that doesn't make any difference.
I know the feeling, to lose your fire.
Yeah.
No.
All of the early Buckshot shows were done live. None of them was ever recorded. If you remember Buckshot, this is an old friend. If you've never heard of Buckshot, this is what you missed.
Speaking of unbelievable things, let's have a big hand for Clyde the Owl.
Quality dogs. The whole show is a quality dog, actually.
Now, this is Woodrow T. Beaver.
Yeah! Hi there, Buckshot.
That's how he welcomes every time.
I'm from the Kananaskis, but I still got an American drawl. I can't figure that out.
Well, it's southern Kananaskis.
Oh, that's what it is.
Southern part of Alberta. So
Oh, I'm glad you explained that.
Texas.
This is our last program.
The Buckshot Show was canceled in 1992, but the characters moved to Saturday mornings to host Tune In. As we taped our interview in the fall of 1997, Tune In had been canceled too. Buckshot and Benny were off the air after 30 years on Calgary television.
Clyde is sort of the opposite of all owls.
You know, the wise owl and all of this? Well,
not me, man. Who you calling wise?
Clyde doesn't quite make that. We do stories. Clyde doesn't understand a lot of the things that's going on, but he's very lovable and...
lovable? You never said that to me before.
Well, I know, but it's kind of an emotional
Don't
time.
try and make up. It's too late, okay?
After all these years. Clyde is basically the storyteller on our programs. He'd read stories out of books to the little guys.
That's right.
And he sings songs. We do a song all the time. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O.
Excuse me? What was that again?
Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. You know.
Shouldn't it be Old MacDonald had a farm, F-A-R-M?
No, we're not trying to spell the word farm when we say E-I-E-I-O.
No, it's not the same number of letters, and not even... None of the letters are the same or anything.
But this is kind of how Clyde and I...
As you can see, we're snapping into a routine here.
Yeah.
There is no statue or monument to say that Buckshot and Benny were ever here in Calgary. But all the grown members of their fan club are perhaps a better legacy anyway. If a cowboy and a bear can get along, maybe the rest of us can too.
As I run across the tater patch to see if my old hen had hatched, she jumped up singing and taking 16 chickens and a tambourine. 16 chickens and a tambourine, sing true rock, root day. Funniest sight I ever seen. 16 chickens and tambourine.
All great cities build monuments to the people who, or the events which, define them. In Calgary, it was neither a person nor an event which made the city what it is today, but a reptile. Meet Dinny, the mascot of the Calgary Zoo, and the secret behind Calgary's success. Many Calgary youngsters remember sitting on Dinny's tail and climbing up his back. Built from scrap metal and concrete in 1937, Dinny the dinosaur reminds us of the many giant creatures like him who, in life, roamed the Great Plains of Alberta millions of years ago, and in death became one of the largest oil and natural gas fields in the world. Jim Gray remembers those heady days of the 1970s, when the only word to describe the Calgary skyline and the price of oil was up.
Well, the 70s were a time of huge growth in this province. The word used to be, hey, I wonder what this city is going to be like when they get it unpacked, because there were cranes all over. People were doing silly things because you could make decisions that weren't commercial decisions, weren't technical decisions, but you get bailed out with higher prices.
But it was at that point in the early 80s, I believe it was, that there were 36 construction cranes in the downtown area, indicating 36 huge buildings going up, and the construction crane became known as the Calgary Bird. You know, and it fit.
People who have only known Calgary as a city will never know what Calgary was like as a town. Not that long ago, Calgary had no skyline to speak of, and the phrase cowtown really fit. Vernetta Anderson remembers milk was still delivered by horse cart downtown when she moved here in 1952, and remembers looking at a house for sale in Montgomery that didn't have any indoor plumbing.
And we looked through all the house, and Nathan fell open the door to the bathroom, said, "This is the bathroom." And there was this can sitting there, big can with the seat on like a toilet, but I could see there was no plumbing. And I said, "Well, what about the plumbing?" He says, "Well, there isn't any. There's a wagon that comes through." So that was a rude awakening.
I remember the days when I was a youngster with a paper route in Calgary with about maybe 40 newspapers to deliver. It covered a vast area of Hillhurst to get rid of my 40 papers. Now, of course, the city goes miles beyond where that paper route was.
In 1977, the Husky Tower, now called the Calgary Tower, was a landmark on the city's skyline. Today, even taller landmarks cast their shadows across it. The oil boom not only caused Calgary to grow up, but out. The community of Windsor Park was annexed in 1951, the Meadows in 1952, Meadowlark Park in 1954, Forest Lawn in 1961, Montgomery in 1963, and Bowness in 1964. In the next few years, more than 50,000 new housing units will spring up across the city, half again as many as were built 10 years ago. A child born in Calgary today can expect to be one of 1.4 million people here by the time he or she graduates from university.
It doesn't get much better than today, and that's good and that's scary. It's good in that in the good days you got to put the seed corn away and you've got to have the good years to carry you through the whole cycle. It's a little scary because a number of people haven't experienced the difficult periods, and so when I hear them, and I hear them from time to time say, well, it's good this time, and we say yes, but it's a cyclical business, and they say, no, it's different this time. Well, when I hear that, I always get a little worried because characteristically our businesses are cyclical. And so while it is good now, and we should be nevertheless disciplined to expect and prepare ourselves for the rainy days.
Alberta's dinosaur legacy is still honored at the Calgary Zoo, where the suspension bridge takes you back in time to when dinosaurs roamed the prairies of Alberta. Dinny remains as the last surviving dinosaur from the zoo's original prehistoric park. He was declared an Alberta Historical Resource and fenced off in 1987. Saplings planted near him have now grown strong and tall, as has the city on the plains. People from around the world were Alberta-bound in February of 1988 for the 15th Olympic Winter Games. It was a chance for Calgary to show the rest of Canada and the entire world just what it could do. Calgary had asked to host the Winter Olympic Games 3 times before. In 1981, the 4th time did it. Back in 1981, Calgary was just beginning to feel the squeeze of a recession. This, and the fact that no Olympic Winter Games had ever turned a profit, brought the rare Calgary pessimists out in force. Bill Pratt was president of the Calgary Games.
Oh, about 82% said we're going to have a ball. 18% said we can't do it. So what's the worry, okay? And there was always that, could we do it, couldn't we do it, can we do it, can't we do it? You know, there was always that. That was always with us. What kind of show would we what bunch of cowboys from Alberta put on, you know? And we surprised them.
Borrowing a page from his experience at the Stampede, Pratt decided to staff the Olympics primarily with volunteers. Not just a few, but more than 10,000 of them, the largest army of volunteers ever assembled in Alberta. Ed Roberts was one of them.
After he had asked me if I would chair this ceremonies committee, and before I had a chance to think about it, I agreed that I would. And later on, Bill was explaining to me that these opening ceremonies have got to set the tone for this whole thing. It's got to get off to a spectacular start. And if it's a flop, Eddie, you better be on the first plane out of town. And if you turn around, I'll be in the seat behind you. That's Bill's way of encouraging you to get on with the job.
The opening ceremonies showed Canadian pride and Calgary hospitality at their best. The parade of athletes included the flags of 59 countries, an Olympic record. The torch was lit by the youngest person ever to do so, an 11-year-old girl by the name of Robin Perry.
Anyway, we're right getting to the dramatic moment here, and things have to happen right on time, and on comes the intercom system. We can't find Robin.
Hugh Dunn produced the Olympic ceremonies and remembers the moment of panic when he heard the torch girl was missing.
We don't know where she is, and of course the question is, go get her. That's the answer, just solve this problem. But you can imagine, 5 minutes when we're building up to the entrance of this thing, and she's to take the torch. Where is she? I don't know.
Right before I was supposed to come out, I left and went to the washroom. So I was actually late. Well, because we didn't know. How was I supposed to know? So they're running up and down the hallways just looking for me.
Robin was on her mark, on time, and no one watching the opening ceremonies that day had any idea of the backstage panic that had just occurred before the torch was passed to the final runner.
And I turned around and ran up the stairs. I do remember I was running up the stairs, and there was I think he was on the Russian team, and he stood out and he was taking pictures. As I'm running up the stairs, I just remember saying, "Move!" And I think I put my hand out because I had to go up that side, and he was standing right in the way, so I just told him to move. That's about it.
Just who would make the final torch run was the biggest secret of the games. Robin, a 7th grader at the time, had been practicing to skate in the opening and closing ceremonies. A week before the games began, her parents told her she would be doing one more thing.
When she came home from skating that night, he brought out a ball-peen hammer. We're in a two-story, oh, really? We're in a two-story house, if only the world knew. And we said, "Robin, take this and run up and down the steps." So she said, "Okay."
Yeah.
We said, "Well, go again." And I said, "How does that feel? Is that heavy?" Or it was about a 5-pound ball. She said, "No, it's okay." And we said, "Well, we've got to tell you something."
And
see.
they're just bubbling with excitement, and I just thought they were idiots. Like, you know, how often do your parents stand at the bottom of the stairs looking proud as punch while you're running up and down the stairs with a sledgehammer? It just, I thought they were off the wall. Couldn't understand it at all. And then they both just sat down, and they were all excited and happy, and they told me.
The 15th Olympic Winter Games in Calgary contributed more than $1.4 billion to the Canadian economy, and for the first time in history, an Olympic Winter Games turned a profit, more than $27 million. Canada Olympic Park, among other sites in town, remains a tangible legacy to the games that were held here. Tomorrow's Olympians train where yesterday's Olympians are remembered. Calgary had so much fun with the 1988 Games that it has bid for them again in 2010 and passed the torch to a new generation.
Oh, we knew it was going to happen all along. We knew it was going to be the best ever. What are you talking about? In Calgary, the impossible takes just a little longer. That's all.
Calgary's always been an optimistic city. There's always been good times ahead. In another 50 years or so, there'll probably be 1 million people living in the city, and there'll be that many more stories to tell. I'm James Keelaghan, and I'd like to thank you for sharing in this time with us, and thank you for being a part of what Calgary remembered. Take care.
Let's go downtown. There's a dance hall I know. There's a band of renown. Darling, let's go out waltzing. Take a spin on my arm. It's a cure for what ails you. A proof against harm. At the fork of 2 rivers near a wood palisade. Neath the turquoise blue sky while the sun slows